Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing? It's lovely to be back. I still have a cough. It turns out it is almost certainly a chest infection, which is lovely. Bacterial, though, I think, rather than viral. So hopefully, okay. I'm just going to take it easy again today and just speak nice and quietly. I will try and avoid my more dramatic moments, although it's quite hard because I think these bits are probably quite exciting. So Alex and Z are still kind of exploring the tunnels beneath Furnace Penitentiary. They are working with Simon, who's kind of showing them around. He showed them into the infirmary where they found Donovan. Donovan's kind of midway through a procedure to turn him into some kind of monstrous hulking beast. His eyes are already silver. And Alex has promised him he's going to get him out of there, but their hands are tied really because they have to keep going back to their cells. And the black suits, even though the warden said they've got to be down there for a month, the black suits are kind of promising a pretty horrific death really, and they're teasing the fact that they could kill Alex and Z at any moment. My little collection of teacups here, which you can't see, fortunately. This is all very neat and tidy, but the rest of the room is literally just 6,000 empty teacups that I'm too lazy to take downstairs. So we remember Simon saying that he wasn't alone down here, and the next chapter is called The Lost Boys, so hopefully we'll find out a little more about who Simon is down here with. That was a cough, not a pirate impression. It will go at some point, this horrible thing, and then I'll be back to normal, so that'll be good. Lost Boys. I'm not ashamed to say that I almost lost it after that. Lying there, the echo of the gunshot still gunning through my skull, the sting of the rat's claws making my arm pound, the grin of the black suit as he dangled my own death over me, seared into my light-starved retinas. I felt myself start to unravel. I could picture my body unwinding into threads, then flooding down the pipe into the toilet with all the other waste. I know it seems strange that I was thinking about death with the same anticipation and hunger with which I was clinging to life only hours earlier, but the two were one and the same right then. My existence was a living hell, fraught with the knowledge that the hatch could be opened at any time and my nightmares would climb inside with me. And death promised a new life, whether it was in the afterlife my mum had always told me about, or as a ghost wandering furnace for all eternity, or even just the wonderful oblivion of nothingness. It meant freedom. And now I had the means to get there. A shudder passed through my body as I realised what I'd thought, but it was difficult to ignore the obvious. I mean, something had made me take that scalpel. Even knowing that I could never hope to use it as a weapon against the legion of giants and gas masks that dwelled down here. Maybe a part of me, a part so far inside me I could barely hear it, knew the real reason that I'd want a blade in my cell. And it would be so easy. I'd have my escape route. No more guards, no more wheezers, no more warden, no more responsibility for saving Z and Donovan and Simon. I smiled, picturing the next black suit to come and torment me as he realised I was free, that I'd slipped out from right between his fingers. Yeah, because you'll be really showing them, won't you? Talking about cutting up your wrists to spite your fate. Where had that come from? It hadn't sounded like me, or like Donovan, for that matter. I wondered how many voices there were living inside my head, and how they could all have such different opinions. Not that I wasn't grateful. If it hadn't been for that chirruped burst of sarcasm somewhere in my subconscious, then maybe I would have just picked up that scalpel again and finished the job. Instead, I located the blade with my fingertips and pushed it across the cell. It hit the lip of my toilet pipe and stopped, as if imploring me to think about what I was doing. But I was, and with a prod, I sent it tumbling towards the sewage below. I know. I should have kept it. It was a weapon, and however small it was, it could have at least given me the element of surprise if I found myself in a skirmish. But you have to believe me when I say that down here that blade was the closest thing to the exit key I had, and sooner or later I would have used it. Dumping the scalpel seemed to take some of the weight off my shoulders, although the fear was still perched on my chest like a demon. What had happened with the black suit and the rat hammered home once again how vulnerable I was here, and there was still no sign of Simon. For the first time since I'd been thrown in the hole, the bad hallucinations started. I saw a figure start to form from the strands of gossamer strung web-like across my cell, and somehow I knew it wasn't going to be Donovan this time. I was right. Neither was it my old friends and family, who would have been welcome, even if they were screaming at me with hatred and anger and sadness. It wasn't even the freaks of Furness. No, this was something else, something I couldn't quite identify, a figure shrouded in black who sat on the fringe of my vision and shifted whenever I tried to focus on it. It didn't do anything, didn't say anything, just sat and stared at me, like it was waiting for me to die. I felt panic grab hold of my guts and I swung around, the figure always one step ahead of me. I slapped the walls in frustration, then started punching them, imagining that the hooded creep was laughing at me, urging me on. I was yelling at it, swearing at the top of my voice, challenging it to show itself, but the angel of death, because I knew that's what it was, hung back, content to watch me suffer. Eventually, I must have passed out, vertigo sucking me up like a tornado, the cell spinning. I cracked my head as I fell, knowing even in the pitch black that my vision was failing. I wanted to drop from this waking nightmare right into a cruel dream. I waited, to drop from this waking nightmare right into a cruel dream, but it seemed that my mind had grown tired of tormenting me, switching everything off and letting me rest in peace, if you'll excuse the expression. I don't know how long I was out for, but it took the sound of my hatch being unlocked to wake me. I didn't even bother to sit up, too exhausted to try to escape my fate. But when the door swung open, it was Simon I saw in the dull light. He grinned lopsidedly, then offered me a hand. Miss me? We ran silently along the corridor, Simon taking the lead and Z and I treading on his shadow. I asked him where he'd been, and he shut me up with a steely look, glancing nervously at the deserted passageways. "Got to be quiet," he whispered as we reached the T-junction that split off towards the infirmary. "Black suits everywhere." I bit my tongue, saving my questions for later. We turned left, and for a minute I thought we were heading back towards Donovan. But although we slowed down as we passed the plastic curtain, we didn't stop. Doors flashed by, gaping black mouths in the red walls, and I could make out voices from inside, more than one. Deep chuckles, guttural snarls, and at one point even a high-pitched, tuneless song that sent shivers up my spine. We reached another junction, one I didn't remember from before, even though we must have passed it the day we were first dragged to the hole. I glanced right and felt something inside me run cold, as if I'd just stepped into a freezer. There was nothing there, nothing I could see anyway. The stretch of barren stone was deserted, but all the same, something seemed to hang in the air, a dark presence that tried to hook itself into my soul as we ran past. "Warden's quarters," Simon hissed in explanation. Then he turned left and the feeling vanished. I glanced back once as we sprinted the other way, invisible eyes boring into my back from the ever-growing shadows behind us. 2 more openings, one on either side of the corridor, no sign of life from inside. Then we reached the massive vault door that separated the prison's underbelly from the caverns beyond. It still hung off its hinges like a broken limb, its thick surface pocked and scratched. Simon motioned for us to stop, edging around the corner and flashing his silver eyes into the cave beyond. I could tell from the way his grey face was suddenly illuminated that the spotlights were on, but there was obviously nothing else there, as after a moment or two the kid darted off again. I followed, keeping my head low as we entered the huge cavern where we'd been caught. It was empty, save for the lights, and we cut right across it, past the tunnel where Z and I had thought we'd seen sunlight, towards the far end. Here the ceiling drooped as if unable to hold up the vast weight above it, leaving a crack between its jagged edge and the floor that was too narrow for even the halogen beams to penetrate. "Hurry!" Simon hissed, grabbing my arm and steering me towards the ugly strip of darkness. He glanced behind him, and I thought I saw movement from another of the fractured corridors that led from the cavern. "Suits," Simon explained. "They patrol around here. Hurry!" I ducked under the uneven lip of the ceiling, finding myself in a small pocket of air surrounded on all sides by rock and jagged piles of rubble. I wasn't sure where to go, but Z was soon in and Simon too, and the bigger kid began to scramble up the wall opposite, vanishing into the gloom. "Where are you going?" Z asked. "I can't see a thing." "Just follow me. It's easier than it looks." He was right. The wall was full of cracks we could wedge our feet into and hooked lumps that served as handholds. The higher we climbed, the darker it got, but it was easy enough to feel our way ahead. After a good 10 minutes or so of slow progress, the acoustics of the space changed, and soon after that, the wall levelled out. Simon grabbed me, pulled me up the last little bit, and while he waited for Z, I tried to get a better sense of where we were. That's when I heard the noise up ahead, a click that could have been the chattering of teeth or the dry voice of some giant insect. "You hear that?" I asked, wondering how fast I could get back down the wall if I had to make a quick exit. It was so dark I couldn't even work out where we'd climbed. "It's okay," Simon called from the shadows. "They're with us." They? He took hold of my overalls and guided me forwards, steering me gently around a post of rock before angling sharply right. We'd taken a few more twisted turns before I heard the spark of a match. The world flared, and I was shocked to see a pair of frightened faces, only a few paces ahead. They scattered back like startled mice. "It's me," Simon said, his voice louder but still cautious. "I brought them." There was a soft pop, and a flashlight fluttered on, the light weaker and more uncertain than the match in Simon's hand. We were standing in a small cave, barely larger than one of the cells up top, the ceiling arched above us. There were 2 other kids in the space, their bodies so hunched and distorted that they looked for a moment like crude paintings on the wall. One stared at us with silver eyes as large as saucers, while the other, the younger, blinked at me through pools of watery blue. I thought I recognised him from Furness, one of the kids who'd been taken during the Bloodwatch, dragged off by the wheezers. The boy with silver eyes ducked his head, and I saw that he was eating something, gnawing at it with animal ferocity. My stomach seemed to turn itself inside out with excitement at the thought of food, until the splintered bone caught the lamplight, and my stomach turned for a different reason. "Is that?" I asked, pointing. Simon followed my outstretched finger, his stance suddenly becoming defensive. "We have to eat," he snapped, but his face twisted into a mask of shame before dropping to the floor. "You Alex?" asked the kid with blue eyes. As far as I could tell, he'd escaped the Weezer's blades. His overalls were rust-coloured in places, but other than that, he just looked like he'd stepped from his cell in Gen Pop. "I remember you. You used to hang with Carl Donovan, right?" I nodded, unsure what to say. "And you can get us out," said the figure in the middle of the room. Like Simon, he'd been cut open and stitched back up, although only his torso was affected, a bloated sack from which skinny limbs stuck out like spider legs. This time I didn't respond. The kid shuffled forwards as if to get a better look at me. "We heard the black suits after you escaped. Man, they were pissed." His throaty laugh was contagious, spreading to the blue-eyed kid and to Simon. Alex, Z, meet Pete. The mutilated teenager nodded a welcome. "He used to be a skull, but he's okay now." "Better than ever," Pete said, laughing again. "The kid there is Ozzy." I smiled uneasily at them both as Pete continued to grind his teeth down on whatever it was he was eating. It was good to see some friendly faces. but part of me had been hoping that Simon commanded an army up here, a band of 50 kids or something who were ready to storm out of Furnace. This ragtag bunch of children didn't look capable of escaping from the cave we were in, let alone fighting their way to the surface. Not that I could talk, I suppose. I don't know what they'd been expecting of me, but right now I looked like a walking skeleton, only held together by the tattered remnants of my overalls. "How have you survived down here?" Z asked. "Why haven't the black suits found you?" "They would have," Simon answered, picking an upturned IV bag from the floor and offering it to me. It was full of clear water, probably from the river, and I drank deeply, the cool liquid putting out a fire in my gut that I hadn't even noticed was raging until now. I passed it to Z as Simon continued. "The dogs have followed our scent a few times, but there's no way they could get up the wall. The suits, neither. They probably just think they're picking up a rat's trail." "Getting pretty bored, though," said Pete. "It's been, a few months at least." "Just weeks for me," said Ozzy. "Feels longer, though. Glad you're here. You know a way out?" I shook my head, and sensing my discomfort, Simon slapped me on the shoulder. "Not yet, he doesn't, but I know exactly where to start." The steeple. Ozzy came with us as we crossed the cave, exiting through a narrow cleft at the back. Pete did his best, but he had barely taken a couple of paces on his wasted legs before they crumpled. "Damn them!" he said with another forced laugh as he passed the torch to Simon. "They could at least have given me the limbs to match this body." "You wait here, keep an ear out," Simon said over his shoulder, taking the lamp and pressing on. "We won't be long." "Is there a way out up here?" Z asked as we shuffled sideways along a passage that was barely big enough for any of us. It sloped down, sometimes so sharply that I thought I was going to tumble into the darkness below. "We're not sure," Simon replied. "I've searched all these tunnels, trust me, been through them again and again and again, tried every crevice, every hole, every damn shadow in the ceiling. Nothing. They're all dead ends, blocked by rock falls, or they just plummet straight down. But then we found the steeple." "Steeple?" I asked, sliding on a carpet of loose stones and clinging onto the wall to stay upright. "I called it that," came Ozzy's voice, muffled by the shadows. "Reminded me of a church." The flickering light from Simon's torch did little to pick out the route ahead, which seemed to close up the further we walked, as though it was trying to force us back. Just to help ward off the fear, I kept the conversation flowing. "So how long were you in Furnace?" I asked, directing the question forward. But it was the younger kid behind me who answered again. "Just a year," he said, then laughed. "I say just. It felt like a lifetime. Got sent down for a murder after my parents were killed. Not by me, I might add." "Black suits?" I asked. "Yeah, black suits. Framed me." "Same here," I said. "I'm supposed to have murdered my best friend. What about the others?" "Guilty as charged. Pete got locked up during the summer of slaughter, with the skulls and all. Doesn't really say much about it. Simon? Well, he'll tell you." "Thanks." Simon's sarcasm echoed off the walls as he tried to squeeze through a crack in the rock. He vanished with a pop, his voice filtering back with the weak light. "Yeah, I was an idiot. The gang fights had finished, but me and my mates got locked up for hitting a jewellery store. Things got out of hand. The owners had a gun." His voice faded as he walked off, and I sucked in my breath to press myself through the gap. The guy threatened to use it. We fought. The gun went off. And the rest, as they say, is history. "Watch where you walk." We'd emerged into another vast cavern, Simon's voice suddenly swallowed by the immense weight of darkness. His lamp revealed that we were on a narrow ledge which dipped away into an ocean of pitch that seemed to have no end. The wall we'd come through stretched up, the dark canvas above us like the night sky and just as cold. The jutting rock narrowed as it climbed, like a needle, like a spire. "Well, this is it," said Simon, gazing up at the invisible ceiling far above our heads. "That's it," Z said, emerging from the hole and brushing the dust from his overalls. "That's our way out." Simon flashed another defiant look our way, but it didn't last, and after a second his face fell. I wasn't sure what he wanted from me, from us, but I didn't see anything that resembled a way out. There wasn't even a glimmer of hope in my mind. It was just another cavern and a pillar of rock that stretched towards nothing. "It's all we've got," said Ozzy as he joined us. "Doesn't look like much, I know, but it's the only part of this whole system that goes any higher. Like Simon said, all the tunnels dead end or go deeper, but this one looks like it could stretch up to the top." There was no way of telling. The light from the lamp clawed its way maybe 10 metres into the heavy shadow, but there it stalled. "I think this is part of the gorge, the one they put the prison in," explained Simon, holding the lamp above his head but failing to illuminate any more of the steeple. "It could lead to the surface." "Have you ever seen sunlight up there?" I asked, knowing the answer already. "No, but that doesn't mean there isn't any." Simon shifted his gaze to the chasm at our side, as deep as the space above us was high. "It has to be, Alex, because there is no other way out." "Even if it was, how would we get up there?" said Z. "We'd need ropes, spikes. Nobody would be able to make that climb, bare-handed." The mood was sinking fast, and the darkness seemed to sense it, pressing down on us. "We could climb it," Simon said, unwilling to give up. He sounded like the child he was, almost stamping his foot to emphasise the point. "Anyway, you're here now. You can help us find a way. Come up with something. You did it before." The rock of the steeple was rough and cracked, like the slope we'd climbed a moment ago, and there were splits that looked big enough to rest on. But Z was right. It would take someone at the peak of their physical ability to scale the steeple, which none of us could claim to be right now. And even if we got there, reached the top, who's to say it wouldn't just end at the cavern roof, leaving us stranded on a rocky pillar with no way down? I realised everyone was looking at me and that I was shaking my head. "I'll think about it," was all I could find to say. "There might be a way. If one of us could scout it, maybe take a rope. I don't know." I could hear the doubt dripping from my voice, but for Simon, the mere mention of an idea seemed enough. He grinned, and for a moment I thought he was going to throw his hulking body forward and hug me. "I knew you'd be up for it," he said. "It doesn't even matter if we all can't make it. Like, I can't see Pete getting up there with his legs, you know. If just one of us can get out, we can find some help." I stared up again, and for a moment I could see it. The steeple pushing relentlessly towards the surface, the ancient rock breaking through the crust of the earth and leaving enough room for us. I imagined my hand pushing through the loose soil, gripped by sunlight, which pulled me out from my grave, laid me down on the warm grass. "See? You feel it too," said Simon, and I realised my cheeks were aching from the grin they were holding up. "There's something about this place. I come here sometimes, lie on the ledge and look up, pretend that it's the night sky up there. Sometimes it's so real I can see the stars, feel the breeze. It's got to be our way." His last word was snapped off early, and he tilted his head, listening to something I couldn't hear. Then he walked past me, back to the wall. "Come on, it's pretty safe here, but the rats will home in on any sounds, and I don't fancy being stuck on this ledge if they show up." "We're staying with you, right?" I asked his misshapen back as he vanished. "In the cave?" "No, we need to get you to your cells." "Oh no," Z and I protested with the same cry of alarm, but he was still talking. "If you go missing, then the black suits will start to suspect something, especially if there's no blood. Right now they don't know anything about us, but if they come looking for you, then they might find us too. We can't take that risk." "I don't know how much longer we're going to stay alive in there," I replied, the rock against my chest and back weakening my words. "Black suits will kill us whether the warden wants it or not." "Just another day or so," said Simon, "till we can think of the best way to get up the steeple." I was about to keep arguing when I realised what was going on. Simon didn't trust us. Not completely, anyway. He was scared we'd make a break for it, find a way out and leave them behind. And if he kept us locked up, then he knew we couldn't go anywhere without him. It seemed pretty harsh, but then furnace doesn't exactly inspire trust. "Why haven't you tried to climb it yet?" came Z's voice from behind me. "I did," Simon replied. "Couple of times, didn't get far before I started to panic. Couldn't find a way to get up there safely. Then we heard the black suits talking about the bust up top and we figured we'd wait, see if someone actually made it out, see if we can follow them." I heard him breathe a sigh of relief as he pushed himself out into the cave. "Now we've got you, and I know you'll think of something. I was never bright, never did well at nothing on the outside, but you came up with the plan, you blew the walls." "Yeah, you've got to tell us how you did it," said Ozzy as we all filtered out into the tiny space. "Another time," said Simon, walking past the expectant face of Pete. "Right now, you've got some thinking to do." The trip back into Furness wasn't half as easy as the trip out, and several times I found myself pleading for Simon to let us stay with him. I should have put my foot down, given the order. Yet the truth was, I was a bit scared of him. His silver eyes were always on me, glinting as if he knew something that I didn't. I couldn't help but be reminded of one of the guards, which chilled me to the bone. On top of that, I'd seen what he could do. I'd never forget the way he'd taken down that rat, then ripped out its throat, bitten it out. If he wanted, he could tear me limb from limb as easily as a black suit or one of their dogs could. And something about him, something about the intenseness of his stare, made me think he was right on the edge of sanity, that he could drop off into madness at any time and take us all down with him. Who can blame him, I thought, as we lurked in the shadows beneath the cavern's low ceiling, waiting for two distant black suits to disappear into the tunnel. Whatever I'd been through, he'd had it 1,000,000 times worse. We were about to move when another guard appeared from a tunnel to our right and walked through the battered vault door, dragging a bloody corpse behind him. It left a red trail as he vanished, a crimson stream that seemed to glow in the spotlights. "Is that a rat?" I asked when the figure was gone. "Where is he taking it?" "To the incinerator, probably," Simon replied, his body tensing, ready to make a run for it. "They burn them. Make sure they don't feed on each other. Make sure they don't, decide they aren't dead and start roaming around again." Both Z and I looked at Simon, but he'd already leaped up. I ran behind him, clumsily sprinting across the cavern floor and wishing once again that the heat on my face was daylight rather than halogen. We skidded past the vault door, following the slick trail up to the first junction. One path split off towards the warden's quarters. The feeling of dread I'd got last time I'd passed was gone, but we had to duck into a darkened room while two more black suits strolled past. My heart was pounding so high up in my throat I could taste it, but they obviously didn't suspect a thing, the military rhythm of their footsteps fading after a few seconds. A couple of cautious sprints later, and we were back at the cells. My heart dropped right from my tonsils to my stomach as soon as I saw them, but it was too late to argue. Simon held mine open, like he was tucking me in, and when I was once again gripped in its smothering fist, he winked at me. "I'll come again after your next meal, if I can. That should give us plenty of time to do this." I reflected his expectant nod, but I couldn't bring myself to imitate his too wide grin, as the hatch once again slammed shut. Okay, next chapter is breaking and entering, and this is where it all starts to get very interesting. I'll leave it there just so I don't overload my poor lungs, and providing that this horrible chest infection doesn't get any worse, I will see you tomorrow. I hope you have a lovely day. It's Saturday. Oh, it's the weekend. You kind of lose track of the days, don't you, when you haven't got work and school to break it up. I can barely know what month we're in anymore, thanks to lockdown. And it's May next week, I think. Crikey. So yeah, I'll see you tomorrow for the next part. Have a lovely day. Speak to you soon.